A lot of people assume audiologists run extra tests just to justify selling hearing aids. But after decades as an audiologist, I can tell you there's one small test behind the ear that sometimes proves a patient may not need hearing aids at all. And regular headphones alone cannot tell us this. In fact, I saw many patients walk into the clinic with nearly identical symptoms, yet after this test, their diagnosis and treatment plans ended up completely different. One patient might need hearing aids, another might need medical treatment. And the difference often comes down to one thing: bone conduction testing. I'm Matt, a retired audiologist, and this is Sound Solutions. I'm not here to sell you hearing aids. I'm here to help you with your hearing, whether you're considering hearing aids or have been wearing them for a while. In the next few minutes, I'll show you why this small vibrating device behind the ear is one of the most important parts of a hearing evaluation, what audiologists are actually looking for during the test, and why it can completely change what happens next. When most people picture a hearing test, they imagine sitting in a sound booth, wearing headphones, and pressing a button every time they hear a beep. That's called air conduction testing, and it's one of the foundations of hearing evaluations. But there's an important part most patients don't realize. Headphones alone don't tell us where the hearing problem is actually happening. And this is where hearing evaluations become much more precise, more than most people expect. When sound travels through headphones, it has to move through the entire hearing system before your brain can actually recognize it. That includes the outer ear, the ear canal, the eardrum, the tiny middle ear bones, and finally the inner ear and the hearing nerve. So if any one part of that pathway breaks down, the symptoms can sound almost identical to the patient. Someone may simply notice, "I can't hear very well," and must need hearing aids. But the underlying cause could be completely different. And this is exactly why the test behind the ear exists. Instead of sending sound through the normal hearing pathway, bone conduction tests using small vibrating device placed directly behind the ear on the bone. Those vibrations bypass the outer and middle ear completely and stimulate the inner ear directly. A lot of patients were surprised when I explained that we can actually hear through vibration. But once they understood that concept, the purpose of the test suddenly made much more sense. Now, here's where things get interesting. If someone hears significantly better through the bone conduction than through regular headphones, that immediately tells us something extremely important. It suggests that the inner ear may actually be working fairly well. The problem may instead be somewhere in the outer or the middle ear, the mechanical part of hearing. And now the entire diagnosis can change. Instead of immediately assuming permanent nerve damage, we may start considering conditions like middle ear fluid, eardrum problems, or otosclerosis that interfere with how sound travels mechanically through the ear. I remember many patients who came into the clinic convinced they needed hearing aids, only for testing to reveal something medically treatable instead. Sometimes it was severe middle ear fluid, sometimes another conductive issue that required medical attention rather than amplification. And this is why experienced audiologists never rely on just one test. Two patients may walk into the clinic describing the exact same symptoms, but once we compare air conduction results to bone conduction results, their paths may look completely different. One patient may have conductive hearing loss, another may have sensory neural hearing loss involving the inner ear or the hearing nerve. Another may have mixed hearing loss involving both systems. And those differences matter because treatment depends entirely on identifying the actual cause. Now, this next part is important because it addresses one of the biggest misconceptions about audiology. Many patients come into an appointment worried the entire process is simply leading toward a hearing aid sale. But throughout my career, the first responsibility of a good audiologist was always accurate diagnosis. You cannot recommend the correct treatment until you understand what is actually causing the hearing difficulty. There were many times when testing pointed towards medical treatment, referral to an ENT physician or ear cleaning, or simply monitoring the condition rather than immediately discussing hearing aids. And honestly, this is one reason bone conduction testing matters so much. It protects patients from assumptions. It helps separate symptoms from causes, and it helps make evidence-based decisions instead of just guessing. Now, if you've never had bone conduction testing before, you're probably wondering what the test actually feels like. Fortunately, it's one of the easiest parts of the evaluation. The small oscillator simply rests behind the ear on the bone while patients listen for soft tones or vibrations. Most people told me it felt unusual at first, but not painful at all. And the test itself, usually very quick. Once we collect those responses, we compare them to the headphone results and look for specific patterns. Those patterns help us determine whether the hearing loss is conductive, sensory neural, or mixed. And often, the moment where two patients with very similar complaints end up with completely different diagnosis and treatment plans. One patient may need medical care, another may benefit from hearing technology. Another simply may need periodic monitoring. That's why precision matters so much in audiology. Bone conduction testing is not about adding unnecessary steps. It's about uncovering what's actually happening beneath the surface. And sometimes it's the test that prevents patients from being placed in the wrong path entirely. The small device behind the ear is often the test that tells the real story. And the more patients understand why audiologists perform these tests, the more confidently they become in making informed decisions about their own hearing health. If you enjoy learning how hearing tests actually work and want straightforward explanations without all the medical jargon, subscribe to Sound Solutions because I break down what's really happening during audiology appointments, step by step, as well as discussing tips and tricks and hearing aids in general. And if you've ever had a bone conduction testing during a hearing evaluation, let me know in the comments whether you knew what the test was actually measuring before.